If you're an author or plan to be one, get excited because this podcast is for you. Book Marketing Mentors is the only podcast dedicated to helping you successfully market and sell your book. If you're ready for empowering conversations with successful marketing mavens, then grab a coffee or tea and listen in to your host, international best-selling author Susan Friedman.
Welcome to Book Marketing Mentors, the weekly podcast where you learn proven strategies, tools, ideas, and tips from the masters. Every week, I introduce you to a marketing master who will share their expertise to help you market and sell more books. Today, my special guest is a book cover designer. Karen Dimmick of Arcane Covers specializes in making genre-specific covers that sell books. She has multiple covers on the bestseller list and has designed recovers for books already released that have doubled their sales. Having had her own best-selling books, she has the advantage of having seen both sides of the cover design process. She believes authors should be able to give their books every possible chance to succeed with a cover that attracts readers and meets their expectations. Karen, what an absolute pleasure it is to welcome you to the show. And thank you for being this week's guest expert and mentor.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Book covers. I love that subject, and it's one I don't think that's really discussed that much. Let's dig in and talk about it and talk about what actually does attract people to your book cover, because I believe it's the packaging, and the packaging is so important. Talk to us about what actually makes a good, attractive book cover.
Well, it kind of hangs on the point of a book cover. And what makes a book cover good and attractive is that it achieves its goal of attracting the people that you want to attract and repels the people that you don't want to attract. So that's kind of a summary of what a book cover should be doing, and therefore what makes it good. Does it attract the people that you're going after?
How do you know what would attract the people who you are going after, your peeps, so to speak?
When you write a book, you've got your ideal reader in mind and you write it for them. You know what they like, you know what problem they're solving if it's nonfiction, you know what genres they like if it's fiction. And you want to design it so that the cover tells people who are just browsing on Amazon, who've never heard of you, that yes, that cover has either a fiction story in that genre or a nonfiction book that just basically tells them it's going to be in the subsection of nonfiction that they want to know more about. They've got a problem that they want solving, whatever it is. And it's the cover that has to tell them that.
Okay, so when you start to work with an author, I'm assuming that there are certain questions that you're going to ask them before you would even start the process. Would that be correct?
Definitely.
Let's get an idea of what kind of questions do you ask authors?
Well, one of the biggest ones is what categories on Amazon are they going to be publishing this in? Because that allows me, especially if it's a genre I don't know, to go and do my research and find out what is in the bestsellers list of those categories, what colors they generally are, what content. So, is it vector-based art? Is it a photograph? Is it illustrated? Whatever it is, you can look through those top 100 covers in each of those categories and get an idea for what is currently selling, which means that's what your potential reader is looking for in the way of a book they think they might enjoy. And you want to come up with the patterns and the trends in those categories and do something that meets those, because that's what attracts that reader that you're going after.
That's interesting, trends, because I'm sure, like with everything, with fashion and anything, there are colors and there are designs that work for certain audiences. So what might be, is there a trend at the moment towards certain colors or certain designs for covers?
There definitely is. If we're just talking nonfiction, because fiction, it's very, very easy. You see your genre tropes. But for nonfiction, there's a lot of little subcategories within nonfiction. You've got sort of business entrepreneur, you've got the sort of the boss lady kind of categories, you've got the sort of writing categories and so on. And each of them has their own different color schemes. If you look quite closely, like the business entrepreneur one tends to have a lot of white, yellows, oranges, reds sometimes. Whereas you get onto sort of the woman boss thing, there then tends to be quite a lot of pinks as well as the yellows and the oranges. It's not so much trends as such. They don't change that much over time on these particular like subcategories, but those are sort of what show up. So you want to match that. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And interestingly enough, I just received a book from an entrepreneur who I actually interviewed a few weeks ago. And her book is a neon green. And it's called Power Your Profits. So it's all about, obviously, how can you add power to the profits in your business?
Yes.
So I was just like, whoa. And it's actually a traditionally published book. And I was like, that seems pretty daring to go with that bright green, that neon green, literally a neon green.
Yeah. It can stand out. And maybe in the finance category, you'll find that there's an overall green trend. I haven't looked recently, but if you have a look, that might be what's showing up. Also, traditionally published books have a definite different standard. They can do a lot more what they like because they've got a different outlet in sort of like the bookshops and so on to attract people. The more looking at what's selling is more important for an indie author.
Yes. I'm assuming that you also would like the author to perhaps have done some research and have some ideas of some of the things that they would like to see on the cover.
If you get a designer who knows what they're doing, knows the genre subcategory that they're designing in, then you don't need to as the author. Personally, I think it's always good to educate yourself as an author. This is what I did when I was writing. I went and looked at what was selling in the categories and genres that I was writing in. So I knew what I wanted from a designer, and that helped me pick the right designer.
I know that we've discussed briefly, but I'm eager to hear what you have to say about the idea of having your photograph as an author on the front cover. I know it at the back cover, you know, when you do a little bio or if there's a flap, a book flap, you would have it in there. But how about on the front cover?
This is an interesting one. And I know you have a very strong point of view on it shouldn't be on there unless you're famous. I half agree with you, and there's a massive caveat. If it's just a book about you, then yeah, you shouldn't be putting your photo on it. If you're trying to sell it on Amazon only, and that's your goal of the book is to get sales from Amazon, I agree, your face should not be on it unless you are super famous. The caveat comes is, what is the goal of the book? Because if the goal of the book is to get you clients as a speaker, and you're going to be going around to companies, maybe doing some coaching or whatever, or some in-house speaking, and they want to hire you for a conference, then having your book with your face on it, even when you're not famous, that will help link that book with your face in their minds when they come to hiring for their next conference. And the same goes as well. If you're a coach, maybe you're a corporate coach, and your goal for the book is to get corporate clients, but not necessarily through Amazon. You're going around doing some in-house coaching, or you're at conferences meeting people, and you're giving it away as like a big business card. Again, having your face on that book can really help link the two in their minds when it comes to hiring. So I think it all comes down to the goal of your book. Like I said, I totally agree with you. If your goal is sales on Amazon and that's how you're going to do it, your face shouldn't be on it. But there are other considerations for what your goal is.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. And I've never actually put that point of view when authors come to me and they say, oh, you know, should I have my face on the cover? And I'm usually emphatic about it, unless you're Michelle Obama or somebody famous, that people aren't necessarily buying it because of you on the cover,
Yeah.
But you're right. If it's a business, you're using it as a glorified business card. So it's a big fat business card because it's not about selling books. It's about selling you as the author. You're not going to make money on the book necessarily.
Exactly.
But you could make money speaking, training, coaching. If that's the goal, that's an interesting perspective. I would be open to that. I still can't say that I would encourage it, but I'm open to that as a possibility.
It just comes down to the goal, because I've helped someone who had this same problem, and we decided to put her face on the cover, and it helped her because she wasn't trying to get sales from Amazon. It actually helped her get work from the book. It does. It just comes down to doing your research beforehand and knowing what your goal for that one specific book is.
Excellent. I hope my authors don't come back to me and say, I know I wanted to put my picture on the book and you told me not to.
Well, if they're selling it on Amazon and they want sales via Amazon, then it shouldn't be there. Maybe they need multiple books. And if one of them is to be handed out in person, that's the one they put their face on. But if you're putting it in bookstores or Amazon and you're not famous, then don't.
And it makes sense because I know that my business card, for instance, I've got my picture on my business card because I want people to remember who gave them that card. When it's just a name, they're like, oh, I don't really remember what that person looked like. Who was that? Susan somebody or other. Yeah. Okay. That's fascinating. Let's talk about other components of a cover. What else should we be thinking about and paying special attention to?
Well, for nonfiction, it's largely about the text. Quite often, it again depends on the subcategory, but quite often there's sort of like a vector art image, sort of clip arty kind of thing in it, as well as the text. And the text treatments, text type, like whether it's serif or sans serif, that will vary dependent on the category that you're publishing in. If you're going for like women boss, they tend to be very big, bold, sans serif fonts. Whereas when you're sort of going into entrepreneur business kind of things, some of them have serif fonts and they're usually smaller and less off the cover, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It's just about doing your research and knowing which categories that you're going to publish in and making sure your cover fits whatever is going on in that. Colors, font styles, font colors, font sizes, image art, everything that goes into that category, because it's different category to category.
Now, one of the points that I learned a while ago and helped me with this is that in terms of your name on the book, that the name, unless you're famous, should be smaller than the actual title. However, if you're famous, then your name on the book would be, let's say, larger font than necessarily the actual title of the book. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with it. In a book cover, usually you have artwork. It may be vector art, or in the case of fiction, some sort of fantasy art, say, and you have the title, and they are your two focal points on the cover, and they need to work together to present the whole picture, if you like. For the typography, you want one thing to stand out, which is why when you see a title, you'll find like some words are bigger than others and some words are smaller. And in general, what I try and do, unless the person is famous, like you said, is the author name is considerably smaller than the title. Obviously, if you're famous, like, say Stephen King was selling a book, well, he could have just a black square with Stephen King written on it and people would buy it. Unless you're that famous, I would put the author name smaller, definitely.
Yes, I like that. And I'm pleased you agree with it, because when you are famous, like you said, a Grisham or a Stephen King, they're going to buy it because of the author, not the title. Whereas a brand new nonfiction author, they're going to buy it because of the title, the subject matter, as opposed to who necessarily wrote it.
Yeah, they are.
The image, again, is it necessary to have an image, or could you just get away with just color?
It is definitely not necessary. In fact, there are some like subcategories where actually they don't have images. It's just all about using the text almost as an image. They're very topography-based covers, as they're called. I've seen some where it's just a gradient in the background and some stunningly beautiful text with patterns all over the text, and it reads really well. It is just down to which subcategory that you're going for as to whether that's acceptable or not.
Okay, so again, that goes back to the research and
Yeah.
knowing what is acceptable in that genre, that subgenre, as you say. What are some of the no-nos when it comes to book covers?
The biggest one is doing something that is opposite to what your readers are looking for. So if I've got a nonfiction, putting some nice fantasy art on it, while it looks pretty, everyone will think it's a novel. The same quite often with photographs and things. There are some nonfiction categories that, yes, photographs are okay, but most of the time you're talking, and I presume your audience is probably more the business entrepreneur kind of area of nonfiction. And for that, photographs, unless it's your face, if you're famous, they're really not in there. You're tending to more towards sort of vector art or just topography. So putting something that the people who are searching because they like that category and they're searching for a book on Amazon and they come across something that doesn't look like it belongs in that category, they won't bother reading the title and finding out if it does. You know, they're scrolling past this at sort of 3 or 4 a second, sort of thing as they're shooting past it. You know what it's like when you're searching for books. And if it looks like a novel that's just been miscategorized kind of thing, then they're not even going to read your title. That's why it's so important to make your artwork as such, whether that's just topography, fit that category. That's probably the biggest mistake you could make.
Yes, but if all book covers look alike or similar, where's the differentiation?
Mostly it is in your title, really. As long as it fits the category that they're searching in, then is it going to jump out at them? Is it well done? Or is it sort of like clearly done by the author's child or the author or that sort of thing? Or was it professionally done? Because there's a very different look between sort of homegrown and professionally produced book cover. So as long as it looks professional, I think it comes down to whether the fact that it's giving off the image that looks like it's going to solve the problem they're solving, they've got, rather. If they're looking for a book on finance, has it got money on the cover kind of thing, or something that represents money? That kind of thing, I think, is what's going to make it stand out compared to all the others. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, no, it does. And you're right. As you said that, I'm thinking about many of my authors who are in the financial planning environment, and their books have had buildings that look like a bank or with pillars and with dollar bills or something that, as you said, represents that genre, even though it might not necessarily look overly exciting, it fits the genre.
Yes. That's the most important thing you can do is fit that genre.
You've mentioned a few times, and I wanted to pick up on it. You talked about a vector. Can you explain exactly for our listeners what that means?
It's something sort of like similar to like an icon on a website. It's not photographic quality. So you don't get sort of, a beautiful photo of a person or something, or a photo of a dollar bill. It's more a representation of it. It's not cartoony as such, but it's very simplified. So it's very basic colors, very few colors, no color gradients in it. Quite often there's black and white, very sharp lines. Hopefully that describes it.
Yeah, so it literally a very simplified, there's no picture, there's no photo. How about the idea of if you do have a photo or some kind of image or pattern or design that wraps around the book? What are your thoughts on that?
I think, again, it depends on the category you're publishing in.
Mm-hmm.
There's quite a few that want a very, very single color background, no pattern, anything like that. And there's some subcategories that will accept patterns. It's just a case of doing the research and finding out. I know most of writing seems to come down to doing the research before you start, really.
Well, and that's absolutely the case, because looking at your target market or your niche market, because that's, my area of specialty is that whole concept of penetrating a niche market and understanding their wants, their needs in that particular environment. And yes, you've got your book that helps sell you and what you're selling. Give us another mistake that goes on that you have or the authors make in this environment.
I guess not having your cover then match your blurb when you click through from the cover would probably be the biggest. Like I said, you've got to have your cover match your genre subcategory, and your blurb has to as well. Oh, I thought of another one. Making your cover too busy. That's a huge one that I see, especially in fiction. I see a lot of people come and say, oh, well, I want this and I want this and I want this. And you need to stick with one concept. It becomes easier for nonfiction because there's only like so much vector art you can fit on a cover. But you really have to stick with one concept, and that's it. No kind of like, well, it also says this. No, it just says, what's your one biggest thing that your book is about? Put that on your cover. That will attract your potential readers that you're going after.
Perfect. How do you get your best work out of working with a designer? People come to you and, they don't know what they don't know. I know when authors come to me and they have no clue about the publishing industry, which I absolutely recognize, and I don't even expect them to. I mean, I'm delighted if they know something and they've, done a little bit of research or they've learned certain aspects of the industry. However, most come completely ignorant, and I'm happy to help educate them. How about working with a designer? What do I need to know? What would be the best way that I could work with you?
I think the best thing is knowing that your designer is on the same side as you. I mean, people, and it's the same with editors, people come there and think, oh, but they're tearing my book apart and, and it's not what I wrote anymore. And it's the same with a cover designer. They're on your side. They want this book to succeed. And if they tell you that the idea that you've come with isn't going to work for where you're publishing your book and what goal you have for publishing your book, listen to them, because they want this to succeed. If you get on the bestsellers list, that means they have a cover on the bestsellers list, and that reflects on them, if nothing else. So they are on your side. They want you to succeed. Trust that they know what they're doing. If you've done your research and you've picked the right designer for you, then they will know what they're doing in the genre and categories that you want to publish in. And you just need to sit back and trust that they know what they're doing and just let them do it.
So one of the things that I tell authors is that they have to be 110, 120% in love with the cover. If there's any aspect of the cover that they're not happy with, the font, a color, something that says, yeah, it's fine, but I can live with it. I was like, no. What are your feelings there?
My feelings are actually very, very different. There are three kind of categories of people that will look at your book cover. There's you, the author. There is your fans, followers, whoever it is. They've read books before, they've done business with you before, whatever it is, they know you. And then there is people who have never heard of you. For me, the cover is there solely to attract the people who've never heard of you. They're there to bring more clients into your business, whether that's readers for fiction or service industry business, whatever it is you do for business. It is there to attract those. And maybe the author hates orange, but the prevalent color in the category they're publishing in is orange. I firmly believe, therefore, that you should be sticking to attract those people who've never heard of you to grow your readership, rather than making sure that the author's favorite color is on the cover, that kind of thing. Yeah, I actually disagree with you. I want my authors to like the covers. I don't want them to hate them. But where I'm trying to make the cover fit is to attract those readers who've never heard of them, to grow their readership and grow their business.
Yes, that's a very different point of view. It's like, oh my goodness, my authors who are listening to this, they'll say, oh, she told me. And I tell you why I take on this perspective. And that is that, and I've heard it said, many of my speaker colleagues who've had books, that they're not in love with the packaging. And they've said that it's affected their ability to sell the book if they don't feel as proud of it as they would like to. And that's where I'm coming from with this, is that it psychologically, that it sort of niggles at you and it's like, oh, yes, I've got this book, but, I'm not really crazy about it. And that comes over, obviously, subliminally, even if you don't have to say it. And I've actually got a colleague currently who wrote a book and he said, I hate the cover. And he says, I just don't sell the book.
Wow. Well, I think part of that is a lack of communication as to why the cover is what it is on the part of the designer. I think if you produce something that, obviously it would still be at mock-up stage, this happened, but if you produce something that the author didn't like, then if you explain why what they want to change is actually going to hurt their book sales and they can see that, then there's that sort of understanding of, okay, now it's my choice. Do I have a cover I love or do I have a cover that's going to sell my book? And, if they then decide that they want to have the cover they love rather than anything else, that's not a problem, but it's a choice that they need to make. And they need all the information to be able to make that choice.
Very wise. Great words of wisdom. Karen, if our listeners wanted to find out more about you and your services, how could they do that?
I have a website at arcanecovers.com. Everything's on there. My portfolio and everything is all on there.
Excellent. So listeners, go check it out. I will put that in the show notes. Then people can go to that website, arcanecovers.com. Yes. Excellent. And I always love to end this way, Karen. If you could leave our listeners with a golden nugget, what would that be?
Do your research and make sure that your cover fits into the subcategory or genre that you want to sell your book in and appeals to the readers who've never heard of you before.
Great wisdom. Listeners, this has been an amazing interview looking at both sides. And as you heard, Karen and I have got different points of view on this. We're both right. Hey, it's your choice in the end. So design a cover that you love and that's going to sell your book. I think that wraps it up beautifully. Karen, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And thank you all for taking time out of your precious day to listen to this interview. And I sincerely hope that it sparks some ideas you can use to sell more books. Here's wishing you much book and author marketing success.
The time is now to take action and finally build your book-selling empire. And the great news is that Susan is here to help you. Visit bookmarketingmentors.com and sign up for a free 15-minute book marketing strategy session with Susan. She'll help you discover your first steps to marketing and selling your book. Only those who take action are rewarded, so visit bookmarketingmentors.com, and we'll see you again next week.